They are the stuff of nightmares, invisible forces twisting bodies, corrupting minds, and shattering lives. The concept of demonic possession sends shivers down our spines, but what if it's more than just fiction? We're about to expose you to disturbing cases where the line between madness, the supernatural, and pure evil becomes frighteningly blurred. Brace yourself, because the truth might be far more terrifying than anything Hollywood could invent.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have Ariana Grande. This is a terrifying paranormal encounter had by the super sweet Ariana Grande. Back in the Yours Truly era for the star, while in Kansas City, she and some friends took a visit to Stull Cemetery, which legend claims is one of the gates to hell on Earth. This turned out to be a more haunting visit than the group had bargained for, however, as the singer recounted that suddenly they, quote, felt this sick, overwhelming feeling of negativity over the whole car, and we smelled sulfur, which is the sign of a demon, and there was a fly in the car randomly, which is another sign of a demon. I rolled down the window before we left and said, "We apologize, we didn't mean to disrupt your peace." Things only got more spooky for Ari though when she later tried to send her manager a picture of the cemetery. This photo she attempted to send came back with an error saying that the file couldn't be sent due to the fact that it was 666 megabytes. In our number 9 spot today, we have Miley Cyrus. In an interview with Elle UK, Miley Cyrus opened up about a haunted apartment that she and her family stayed in during her 2009 European tour. She said, quote, "It was seriously so terrifying. It used to be an old bakery and they turned it into an apartment building, and I was having really crazy dreams and really scary things, and one night my little sister, it sounds crazy to tell you, but she was standing in the shower and all of a sudden I hear her scream. I run in there and the water had somehow flipped to hot, but it wasn't like the water had just changed, the knob had turned, but she hadn't turned it and it was burning her. She was really red." She continued on with the chilling tale by saying, quote, "Before I felt this, I thought I had seen a little boy sitting on the sink watching me take a shower, so I felt really freaked out. I was sitting there the next night, and maybe I'm crazy, but I could have sworn I could see this little boy sitting there on the sink caking his feet. My mom was getting mad that we were looking into it because she thought it was going to scare Noah, so then my aunt, who we hadn't told about this, comes in and she starts freaking out. She's like, I have no idea what happened, but I left the apartment and I came back and all of the doors and windows were open. I locked the apartment." She finished off her creepy story by saying that there were a few more strange things that happened, and this all was enough for her to swear off ever staying in that place again. Miley believes the haunting ties back into the history of the building and says that the apparition she saw matches up with who once lived there. In our number 8 spot today, we have Adele. The haunting story of Adele starts off when she decided that she had had enough of fans and paparazzi outside of her London home, so she decided to purchase and move to a new home in Sussex. This house, in its past life before housing the Grammy Award winner, is said to have been a convent. Despite the change, Adele continued to be visited by people she didn't want in her home, but this time the visitors were otherworldly. The singer claimed that she began to hear noises that she was unable to find the source of. Things in her home also began to fall for seemingly no apparent reason, and apparently these paranormal encounters made Adele so unsettled that she had to hire a bodyguard to stay in her house full time. Hopefully these plaguing hauntings have since stopped, but only Adele knows for sure. In our number 7 spot today, we have Ozzy Osbourne. One of the most famous rock stars ever, Ozzy has long been connected to the occult. I mean, Ozzy, Prince of Darkness, didn't just come from nowhere. Aside from the rumors, however, Ozzy has been fairly open about his personal connection to the devil. In a 1984 issue of Hit Parader, Ozzy said, quote, "I really wish I knew why I've done some of the things I've done over the years. Sometimes I think that I'm possessed by some outside spirit. A few years ago, I was convinced of that. I thought I truly was possessed by the devil. I remember sitting through The Exorcist a dozen times, saying to myself, yeah, I can relate to that." He even has expressed confusion over whether or not if he's a medium for some kind of outside source or if something much more sinister is at play. When speaking of actually selling his soul, Ozzy had some less than comforting things to say. He said, quote, "I already have. Well, you sell your soul to the devil when you do something yourself that you shouldn't, and I already have. I've lived my life to the fullest. If there's an afterlife, I've got a good spot in the furnace. You know? In our number 6 spot today, we have Post Malone. Good old Posty has probably one of the most famous celebrity haunting stories, and it all started with a visit to ghost hunter Zach Bagans' museum. Within the museum was an old wine box that is said to hold a Dybbuk, which in Jewish mythology is a malicious demon. This box had come to the museum after the previous owner bought it on eBay and had some really horrible things happen to him and his family afterwards. These included reports of him having really horrific nightmares, and this extended to anyone else who touched the box, and sometimes even those who had just been around it. Even worse, his own mother had a serious medical emergency after he had given this box to her. This is all to say the haunted item showed up in the Bagan Museum, and then 2018 rolled around and Post Malone decided to take a haunting tour of the occult collection. During this tour, Post Malone reached out and touched the box, and, well, he has been dealing with the consequences ever since. These are said to include the same horrific nightmares detailed by the box's previous owner. In our number 5 spot today, we have Bob Dylan. Not necessarily who I really expected to put on this list, but there was an interesting interview back in 2014 that made many people speculate that the musician might have actually sold his soul. In the interview, he was explaining that he owes his years of fame and success to a deal he made. The interviewer asked, "Why are you still out here?" To which Dylan replied, "It goes back to that destiny thing. I made a bargain with it. You know, long time ago, and I'm holding up my end." The interviewer, of course, had to follow up on that cryptic message, so he said, "What was your bargain?" And he replied, "To get where I am now." The interviewer asked, "Should I ask who you made the bargain with?" And he replied, "With the chief commander." The interviewer clarified, "On this earth?" To which he answered, "In this earth and in a world we can't see." I can totally see why some people decided to draw their own conclusions from this. I mean, it sounds like he's basically speaking in riddles, so while he doesn't outright say that he sold his soul, some believe that this is what he was trying to say in that interview. In our number 4 spot today, we have Mike Colter. You might know Mike Colter as he plays Luke Cage in the MCU, but what you might not know about the actor is a very ghostly encounter that he had. Back in 2019, Mike was on Kelly Clarkson's show, and while on the show, he had an eerie tale for the audience when he said, quote, "I'm from the South, and there's a lot of things that happened in the South that don't happen anywhere else." Of course, Kelly inquired further, and that is when the star revealed a reoccurring moment that he claims happened, quote, "night after night." His mother basically explained it to him as a spirit being attracted to his energy. He said, quote, "When I was a kid, I used to have this thing that was sitting on my chest when I would sleep, and it was keeping me from getting up, and I couldn't open my eyes, and I would struggle." I don't know about you guys, but that sounds absolutely horrifying. I know a couple demons that could match up with that. Maybe it's a sleep paralysis demon, who knows? In our number 3 spot today, we have Vanessa Hudgens. Just last year, in April of 2022, Vanessa appeared on the Kelly Clarkson show. I guess everyone's just on the Kelly Clarkson show talking about their paranormal experience. And during this appearance, she spoke about having, quote, "a lot of paranormal encounters over the years." She said, quote, "I kind of shut it down for a while because the unknown is scary, but I recently was like, no, this is a gift and something that I have the ability to do, so I'm going to lean into it." Expanding on how she is leaning into these abilities, she explained that she had actually recently completed her first real paranormal investigation. Now we have Ed, Lorraine, and Vanessa. During this investigation, she said she met a very playful ghost at the site of a cemetery. I mean, I guess it's not like a malicious spirit. She said that she was able to speak to this ghost using a spirit box, and that after introducing herself, the ghost replied and repeated the names back to her. Maybe this year we'll see Vanessa diving even further into the paranormal, the occult, and all of these otherworldly beings. In our number 2 spot today, we have Courtney Cox. Back in March 2022, former Friends star Courtney Cox shared a harrowing experience she had that led her to go as far as to sell her house. She said, quote, "I didn't believe at first, but But I lived in this house in Laurel Canyon, which is in LA, obviously, and it was Gypsy Rose Lee's house and Carole King's. She went on to say, quote, "So Carole King came over to my house and she said that there had been a divorce that was really ugly and that there was a ghost in the house. And I was like, yeah, whatever. But other people would stay there with me, like friends of mine, and they said they felt an encounter with a woman who was sitting on the edge of the bed." Despite these tales from her friends and even doing an actual seance with Carole, Courtney still wasn't really a believer of the supernatural. This all did eventually change, however, and it happened when a UPS worker came to her house. Quote, "I was at the house one day, not being a believer. The doorbell rang, it was a UPS guy or something, and I opened the door and he said, 'Do you know this house is haunted?' And I go, 'Yeah, why? Why do you think that?' And he goes, 'Because there's someone standing behind you.' And I was like, let's sell. She said she quickly put the house up for sale. After that, and that she, quote, couldn't sleep there alone ever again. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have Cynthia Rowley. So there was a show called Celebrity Ghost Stories, and in an episode, Cynthia Rowley showed up to share her haunting tale. The designer recalled a spooky tale that took place at her estate, which is located in Greenwich, Connecticut. She explained that there was a, quote, ghost-like feeling in the house, which certainly is an eerie feeling, but soon a feeling turned into something a little bit more tangible. Eventually, Cynthia began seeing a sort of apparition in the corner of a room in the home. This apparition appeared as a woman who was wearing a sort of scarf over her face. This is all chilling enough, but things only got worse when Cynthia had to escape a fire in her home. She did, thankfully, and was fine, but then the local fire chief told her something she hadn't previously known. The woman who once owned the home she now lived in was called the, quote, diamond match heiress who was badly burned in a blaze. Seems like Cynthia may have been haunted by the previous owner of the house, and not just in like a tacky decor kind of way, I mean like for real haunted.
Starting us off with number 10 is Satan's Enigma. Back in August of 1676, 31-year-old Sister Maria Crucifissa della Concisione was found dead in her cell. Also, can we get a slow clap to me for even pronouncing that correctly? Yeah. Her face was covered in ink and she was found holding a letter written in a code that took centuries to decipher. Maria said the devil wrote the letter to try and get her away from the path of God. The letter that featured 14 lines translated to this: God thinks he can free mortals, the system works for no one. Perhaps now Styx is certain. In Roman and Greek mythology, the river Styx separates the living world from the netherworld. Maria was also said to have bipolar disorder or schizophrenia and was fighting against numerous evil spirits. I feel like the message had to be written by her while she was possessed or something, because after the fact, her behavior at the convent became very bizarre, and it's like, hello, Sister Maria, what you doing? But what does the letter even mean? It took centuries to decode, surely it's important, but I feel like it just got decoded and no one cares. Coming in at number 9 is Sister Madeleine de Demondol. So back in 1611, there occurred a series of demonic possessions amongst the Ursuline nuns of Aix-en-Provence. 17-year-old aristocrat Madeleine entered the convent after having admitted she had had a relationship with Father Louis Graffiti. She was then sent to Aix to get away from Father Louis, but by 1608, things got ugly. The girl started showing signs of being possessed. She would shake, convulse, and it seemed to be contagious since the other nuns started doing the same. So many exorcism attempts were undertaken, but nothing was successful. In 1610, the exorcisms were still going on, and it was like the girls were all in competition with each other, like who was the most possessed. Like, oh, you can speak in tongues in Latin? Well, I can levitate, so there's that. Now, they all had their own demon personalities, and it was suspected that Father Louis had seduced Madeleine and caused her to become possessed. Almost all the nuns involved had some sort of infatuation with Father Louis. He was later tortured, wherein he confessed to having a pact with the devil, after which he was killed via strangulation and being burned. I mean, I'm not gonna say he low-key deserved it, but he high-key deserved it. At number 8, we have the Ursuline nuns. The case of Father Louis and those Ursuline nuns foreshadowed the events, including Father Urbain Ranzy, a Roman Catholic priest that lived in the Loudun part of France. He was under major scrutiny and received a lot of criticism for ignoring his celibacy vow, and if anything, he was known for having sexual relations with many many women, and as someone who had an elevated sense of lustful depravity. By 1632, he was accused of sending the demon Asmodai to enchant a group of Ursuline nuns into committing evil acts and becoming his sex slaves. Mother Superior Jeanne d'Agnes claimed she had demonic dreams that Grandier was in, as well as visions of people that had already died. After numerous nuns had similar experiences, they all accused him of seduction and witchcraft, and he was arrested, then acquitted, and then re-arrested. During the second arrest, he was tortured by judges, after which they revealed a contract they found in his bedroom, which indicated he had signed a deal with Satan and many other demons. They saw it as evidence of him making a diabolical pact and convicted him of witchcraft and sentenced him to death. He was burnt at the stake, and rightfully so. Filling at number 7 slot is the murder. Marikika Irina Komichi was a nun who started hearing voices at the age of 23 years old. She thought it was the devil talking to her, telling her she was sinful, but other nuns refused to believe it, and she was treated for schizophrenia. However, she relapsed, and so a monk and 4 nuns tried something else, an exorcism. She was bound to a cross, gagged with a towel, and left in a dark room for 3 whole days with no food or water. That's proper torture. That's not even an exorcism. Like, hello, Human Rights Commission. Sadly, this doesn't end well, and Marikika ended up dying due to dehydration and suffocation. She was meant to go to a nearby village 10 days later, but never showed up. Daniel, the monk who led the exorcism, said he restrained her because she became violent and refused to drink the holy water, whereas a psychiatrist who treated her said this was all a symptom of schizophrenia and that she was most likely just having her first episode. But also this just doesn't add up, because they thought that originally and she relapsed, so was it schizophrenia, was it not? Either way, I guess we'll never really figure out what the true cause was, but Daniel and the 4 nuns were charged with aggravated murder and could face 25 years to life. Now at number 6 are the Louvière possessions. A lot of nun possessions going on in France in the 1600s, let me tell you that much. So back in 1625, Sister Madeleine Savant was said to be the first possession victim at the hands of Father Pickard, who apparently gave her magic potions and also got her pregnant. Do none of these people take celibacy seriously? Like, what is the point then? What is the point? Now, the possession occurred after his death, and she told authorities 2 men had kidnapped her and taken her to a witch's sabbat where she married the devil and had sex with him. Her confession made other nuns come forward too, who claimed that Father Pickard had taken them to secret sabbats for the same thing. The nuns would contort in unnatural shapes, speak in tongues, be uncontrollably violent, and shout obscenities like there was no tomorrow. Now, the Loudun possessions the decade before made this all not really that surprising, but the hysteria made it super public. All the exorcisms were seen by everyone, and eventually Madeleine was imprisoned for life, and Father Pickard's body was exhumed and then burnt. Cause even in death, we gon' burn your body. Coming in at number 5 is Benedetta. The book The Devil Within recounts the history of demonic possession and features the story of a nun called Benedetta. Back in 1619, Benedetta was interrogated to find out why she'd engaged in a bunch of sexual acts with another nun called Bartolomea. She exclaimed that a male angel called Splendiletto had possessed her and would speak in his voice. But whenever she became him, it seemed like he was more demonic than he was angelic. Anytime it was him speaking, Benedetta was a lot more maniacal and lewd. But also, was she really possessed by a demonic entity, or was she just a scared closeted lesbian who didn't know what else to do? And number 4 is Dark Waters. This 1994 horror film features a convent containing quite a few disturbed nuns. They're seen practicing bizarre rituals that are in no way Christian, and they seem to be protecting or subduing some entity in the catacombs under the building. The main character Elizabeth goes to this convent, which is on a remote island, because that's where her mum gave birth to her right before dying. There she discovers demonic books in the library and gets attacked by a nun. She also finds the nuns whipping themselves in the basement and laying down in some strange formation. Elizabeth tries to figure out where her birth mother is, but the nuns burn alive the woman she tries to speak to. If that isn't bad enough, a nun at the convent called Sarah befriended her, but she's clearly not that good person. She cut up and nailed another nun to a chair. We later find out that Sister Sarah is half human, half demon, and is Elizabeth's sister. The girl's mum was a demon, and she's the one trapped inside the convent, which the nuns were trying so desperately to contain. Filling at number 3 slot are Two Fingers. This is another story featured in The Devil Within, and it gave me very Reagan from The Exorcist vibes. Apparently there was a nun at this French commune called Auxonne who got possessed. Again, there's only like 2 nuns on this list who aren't French, which is highly suspicious. What is it about French nuns that make them more susceptible to getting demonically possessed? Like, damn puppy. Anyway, during her possession, this nun apparently held up a giant heavy marble vase full of holy water. Now that sounds like a perfectly nunnish thing to do, except for the fact she lifted the entire thing with only 2 fingers. Now at number 2 is Valak, maybe the most infamous possessed best nun to exist, even if she is just a fictional character in the Conjuring universe. However, what's not fictional is the demon Valak, who's described in the Lesser Key of Solomon grimoires. Valak as a demon can control, locate, and summon serpents at will, which is quite a dangerous yet cool power to have if you ask me. In the movie, the duke that built the castle that is now the monastery was obsessed with the occult and summoned Valak himself back in the day, who took the form of the nun. Obviously in the movie, the demon has more abilities like telepathy, shape-shifting, and the ability to block clairvoyance. Valak kills all the nuns in the monastery and toys with Sister Irene by making her believe she's in the monastery with a bunch of other nuns, when really she's all alone, and Valak had already killed them all. And finally, at number 1 is Sister Magdalena de la Cruz. This Franciscan Spanish nun was actually honored as a living saint for a very long time. At 5 years old, Magdalena was known for her hardcore devotion to God and for the fact people thought she saw Jesus. She would have mystic heavenly visions, but with heavenly apparitions, there are also demonic ones to go with them. At some point, her heavenly visions slowed down, or the diabolical ones took over, because it said she made a pact with the devil. She goes on to become abbess of her convent, which is good since everyone wanted her to be, but bad since she was severe in her acts of penance and ordered her sisters to do the same. Magdalena would scare the other sisters and force them to confess to severe sins. Some would cry, but others went to a possessed state where they'd roll on the floor and contort their bodies before eventually going back to normal. She encouraged the nuns to use iron-tipped whips to self-inflict penance on themselves, and all this while she was being guided by the devil himself. In 1543, she falls extremely ill, and it's then that the priest suspects that she's possessed by a demon, so she started convulsing when trying to confess. The Inquisitor is brought in, and she reveals that all those years ago when everyone thought she had a vision of Jesus, it was actually the devil that she met. He had promised her fame and respect as long as she would obey him always, and so she agreed at 5 years old.
Possessing our number 10 spot, we have a supermarket possession. Before I saw this video, the scariest thing that I thought can happen at a supermarket was inflation of prices, but then I came across this video. This clip is of a woman who is browsing a supermarket over in China. But suddenly she looks around and then her body becomes completely taken over by like a demonic spirit. Her head is thrown uncontrollably back and her body starts convulsing. People in the store approached her and try to help her out, but they become so scared, so all they can do is just watch from a distance and call the police. But maybe they should be calling the rain warden or maybe a priest to come perform some exorcism. I'm not sure what a police officer would do at this point. If I saw this woman possessed, like if I walk into a supermarket and I saw that, I would just turn around like it never happened and I would not shop there anymore. Indian exorcism comes onto this list at number 9. In one of the most prestigious Hindu temples in India, well, there is a locked room that holds some of the most tormented people in India. It's called the Cave of Spirits, and it is known as the last hope for people who are possessed by a demon. Several girls in a nearby village have become possessed by an unknown spirit. The families tried everything to get rid of the demon, but nothing worked. So they attempted to perform an exorcism in the temple.
One by one, the girls break down.
When the spirit comes forth, the girl loses all control over her body.
The exorcism appeared to be successful.
Mooney will leave, but the spirit that tormented her will remain here forever.
Sleep possession takes us to number 8. A young guy who has had trouble sleeping decides to record himself with a CCTV camera that detects movement and audio. For me, I never want to do this. I never ever feel the urge to record myself sleeping, just in case I actually do see something. Like, I don't want to freak myself out where I can never sleep again. Well, this guy, he wanted to see if there's anything unusual that was causing him to wake up in the middle of the night. But once he reviewed the footage, he wasn't relieved at all. Well, let's take a look at what happened. Let's take a look at what he saw. Yeah, this is exactly why I don't ever want to record myself sleeping. I don't want to know what weird things are lurking in my room or if I'm being possessed by a sleep demon. Sometimes I have a hard time sleeping, and by sometimes I mean all the time, or I wake up tired, but I'm definitely not going to investigate why. I don't want to know that I've been possessed by like Freddy Krueger or something. Number 7, we have the exorcism of Annalisa Michael. When she was 16 years old, Annalise suffered from a major seizure and was diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy. She was prescribed a medication, but that didn't stop her seizures. Annalise said that she kept seeing devil faces throughout the day, and she was even complaining of depression and hearing voices. The voices told her that she would rot in hell and that she was cursed. So her family began to believe that she was possessed by a demon, and they called a priest to perform an exorcism. That's when things got out of hand. Here is some audio taken from the exorcism. Unfortunately for Annalise, she was found dead in her home, and an autopsy stated that the cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration. So during the exorcism, her priest and her family failed to keep her alive, and at the end of it, she only weighed 68 pounds. And it's not even clear if she was actually possessed or not. She could have just had an untreated schizophrenia. Subway possession drives us to number 6.
Oh my god.
Is this real life right now? I mean, good luck sleeping tonight. I don't even know what just happened. Apparently this footage was filmed in a subway station in San Francisco. Someone get that woman a Snickers. But all jokes aside, I really hope that people filming this called the police or told the authorities at the subway station, because she looks like she could seriously hurt herself. I think that she isn't possessed by a violent demon, then she must have snorted some like flakka, because I don't know what else this could be. I'm pretty scared from this, so let's move on. And what the heck is flakka? Who's naming these things? Pope Francis' exorcism blesses us at number 5. This footage was filmed at St. Peter's Square in Italy, and it's of Pope Francis apparently performing an exorcism. The priest that is behind the young man whispered something to the Pope, which caused him to recite an intense prayer. During the prayer, the man's mouth opens wide and he is exhaling sharply. The Vatican downplayed the incident, and they are claiming that Pope Francis just recited a prayer, but lots of people think that he performed a quick exorcism. What do you guys think? And at number 4, we have a possessed woman on a train. What is with all these possessed people riding public transportation? This is exactly why I got my license and drive a car. I'm officially freaked out. This possessed woman was filmed on a train that was in Alberta, Canada. After she looked at her cell phone, she started to act really weird, and she suddenly attacked another passenger who was sitting beside her.
Whoa. Whoa, chill.
She grabbed the man's throat and punched him with her other arm. So yeah, she was either possessed by a demon, or this is the direct result of using some drugs. Or this is the direct result of using drugs. I'll let you guys be the judge. Convenience store possession checks us into number 3. This footage is brought to us by a security camera in a convenience store. As you can see, the video was of a normal guy who just wanted to buy a drink, but then all of a sudden he began to violently shake and make strange noises. Someone needs to call a priest, because if it's not a demon, then I'm gonna guess he's going through some like Red Bull withdrawals. If we fast forward the clip to the end, the man passes out on the floor and a dark shadow appears to move in the reflection of the refrigerator door. Watch. A bloody demonic possession takes us to number 2.
Você não é poderoso. Jesus, Deus está aqui. Deus é maior do que tudo.
I literally have no idea how I'm going to sleep tonight. This video is pretty messed up. The person using their phone to film him, instead of calling 911, should probably be arrested. He is clearly injured and no one is helping him. Apparently the guy has a gun wound to the face, but I think tomorrow he is going to have an extreme backache. But no, seriously, how the hell is he moving around with his back like that? This poor guy is in serious need of an exorcism, a doctor, a chiropractor. Get him something. Pope Francis, where you at? Finally, number 1 spot, we have a really scary possession. I'm about to show you a tape that was recorded back in 1973. This footage was was found in the attic of a home by the new owners, and what was found was very disturbing. Okay, what the hell was up with that creepy ass laugh? That will literally haunt me for the rest of my life. I don't think I'll ever be able to sleep again. I think we should all start a support group because there's no way I'll ever be able to get over this. So the support group will be for me and for you guys watching this as well.
Starting off this countdown, we have the exorcism of Gottlieben Dittis. This is the name of a 28-year-old German woman who was said to be possessed in 1842. It all started when she began to experience paranormal activity going on in her house. Soon after the haunting started, she would slip in and out of these trance-like states. It took the priest 2 years before the demons were finally expelled from her body. So for 2 years, she was tortured by the demons inside of her. In fact, apparently she would vomit blood, glass, and nails. That sounds very painful. After a number of exorcisms, this woman was finally freed. It was revealed that she was being possessed by a widow who went crazy and murdered her family and then buried them in a field. Moving on to number 9, we have the exorcism of Gina. In 1990, a teenager from Florida by the name of Gina underwent an exorcism. In fact, her exorcism was broadcasted on the ABC network for millions of people to watch. In the end, 29 million people ended up tuning in. During the exorcism, Gina was strapped to a chair and tried to fight back a number of times. She would bark at the priest and yell out when he would press a cross against her forehead.
I therefore enjoin every unclean spirit, each devil, each partner of Satan.
As the prayers intensify, so do Gina's physical reactions. The team's doctor ties her arms and legs to the chair.
Fear and take flight at the...
In the end, it was found that she was being possessed by a number of demonic spirits, including one named Zion and one named Minga. In our 8th spot today, we have the exorcism of George Lukens. In 1788, a woman named Sarah Baber reported English tailor George Lukens to the church and begged them to help him. George's behavior was very alarming to her, and she knew he was possessed. He would go into these fits where he would scream and sing loudly in different voices. He would also make inhuman noises and sing church songs backwards. On Friday the 13th of that year, 7 priests performed an exorcism on George, during which he barked and growled. In the end, the 7 priests commanded the demons in George to leave. Thankfully, it worked. All of a sudden, George snapped out of the state and said, "Bless Jesus." He then recited a prayer, and they knew the demons were finally cast out of his body. Coming in at number 7, we have Clara Germaina Seeley. In 1906, a 16-year-old from South Africa, Clara Seeley, decided to make a pact with the devil, which obviously went wrong because she ended up getting possessed. During her possession, she would behave erratically, growl, speak in tongue, exhibit superhuman strength, and would even tear the clothes off of her own body. In fact, when the priests were performing the exorcism, the holy water they splashed on her would literally burn her skin, and she even levitated in front of 170 witnesses. In the end, a noxious smell left her body, and that's when she was freed from the demon that was possessing her. Moving on to number 6, we have Michael Taylor. Sadly, this exorcism did not end well for Michael or his family. It was 1974, and Michael was a 31-year-old father of 5 children and husband to Christine Taylor. Everything was going fine until one day he just snapped. He had a huge public outburst and started screaming at everyone and was being belligerent to his wife. According to a witness, she said, and I quote, "Suddenly I glanced at Mike and his whole features changed. He looked almost beast-like. He kept looking at me and there was a really wild look in his eyes. I knew that only the name of Jesus would save me, and I just started saying over and over again, Jesus. I firmly believe that I was only by calling on his name that I was not killed." Michael ended up undergoing a number of exorcisms. One night, a bunch of priests spent hours casting out 40 demons from him. They knew there were 3 more demons inside of him: murder, madness, and violence. But they were all exhausted, so they went home and planned to resume the following day. That night, he attacked and killed his wife. Police found him shortly after, wandering the streets covered in blood. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the possession of Julia. Now, this is a fairly recent case of possession. In 2008, a woman named Julia became possessed. Apparently, Julia was the queen of a satanic cult, and one night got attacked by a demon. Immediately, she knew she needed help and went to a local priest. But the priest was like, "Hell to the that no, I'm not dealing with this. And so she reached out to a psychiatrist named Richard Gallagher. Gallagher then analyzed her behavior and knew she wasn't mentally ill but was indeed possessed. During their meeting, items would fly off the shelves in his office and Julia would speak in tongue and share intimate details about Richard that she couldn't have possibly known. When she did undergo her exorcism, she got very violent. She had super strength, she levitated, and changed the temperature in the room. That's insane. In our fourth spot, we have the exorcism of Laura. This is another fairly recent case of possession. Back in 2015, a woman named Laura from Argentina became possessed. In fact, her entire exorcism was filmed. During the exorcism, we could see Laura writhing in pain and contorting her body. She also screams a number of profanities and bangs her head on the ground. While the priests are trying to get the demons out of her, she screams "no" out loud in pain. The exorcism finally comes to an end when she begins crying and then falls backwards exhausted. Thankfully, after all of this, she was freed from the demons possessing her. In our third spot, we have the exorcism of Rosa. In 2015, a man named Father Amorth took on the possession case of a woman named Rosa. Rosa was in her late 30s when weird things began to happen to her. She was acting different and would constantly have outbursts. Things got so bad that her family took her to see Father Amorth. He ended up performing 9 or more exorcisms on her. During the exorcisms, Rosa's body would throb. She would thrash violently, she would foam from the mouth, and she would try to attack the bystanders. She even would talk to the father in Latin when she didn't even speak the language. In the end, the exorcism was successful, and Father Amorth determined that the cause of her possession was due to a curse that her brother's girlfriend put on her. Both her brother and the girlfriend were members of a demonic cult, and the girlfriend was a witch. In our second spot today, we have Anna Eklund. This is another very famous exorcism case. Anna Eklund was an American woman who in 1928 became possessed and underwent a number of exorcisms. During her exorcisms, things would happen like she would hiss or howl like an animal. She would float in the air, and whenever holy water would touch her skin, it would burn her skin right off. She would also climb up her bedroom walls and speak in tongues. This all started when she was 14 years old, but got worse as she got older. Now, the first exorcism took place when she was only 14, and it was a success, but only for a short period of time, because she became possessed again in 1928. After that, Anna underwent 30 exorcisms, but all of them failed. So they decided to send her to St. Joseph's Church in Iowa to see if they could get the demons out of her. While there, she apparently would throw up 20 to 30 times a day, and it reeked. It was so bad that nuns had to take 15-minute shifts with her, or else they would fall ill. In the end, it was discovered that Anna got possessed due to a curse that her father and her aunt put on her. How messed up is that? Her aunt was apparently a witch that mixed potions in with her food that caused her to become possessed. And in our number one spot today, we have Roland Doe. The case of Roland Doe is the true story that inspired the movie The Exorcist. It all began in the late 1940s in Washington, D.C. with a 13-year-old named Roland Doe. We don't actually know his last name, so they just gave him the last name Doe. Other people call him Ronald, so we don't even, that's not his real name. Anyways, the poor boy lost his Aunt Harriet, who he loved and shared a special connection to. Shortly after her death in 1949, Roland started to experience strange things. He would hear scratching coming from the floors and walls of his room, and things around him would move on their own. Roland's family began to worry about him, so they went to a local Catholic priest for help. They then decided to perform an exorcism on Roland. Upon doing so, Roland would convulse badly. He even managed to rip out a spring from the mattress that he was strapped down on. He then took the spring and slashed one of the priests with it. A few days later, scratches began to appear all over Roland's body. In fact, at one point, an X appeared scratched into his chest. Another thing they saw was a pitchfork-shaped pattern of red lines move across his body. The marking went from the boy's thigh and moved down to his ankle. The priest, after analyzing Roland, noticed a strange pattern in his behavior. During the day, he was calm and normal, but at night, he would get wild and scream and act belligerent. Every night, Roland would undergo an exorcism. It was believed that he was possessed by 10 demons. Finally, on April 18th in 1949, the priest managed to expel Satan from his body. They shouted at Satan, saying that St. Michael would battle him for Roland's soul. 7 minutes later, Roland came out of a trance and simply said, "He's gone." After that, everything seemingly went back to normal.
And we're starting things off with the case of Arne Cheyenne Johnson. 1981, a chilling case involved Arne Johnson became infamous due to its connection with famed paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Johnson was accused of stabbing his landlord to death during a heated argument, but what made this case so odd was the defense's claim that Johnson had committed the act while under the influence of demonic possession. The Warrens had entered the picture before the stabbing took place, when Johnson's fiance's younger brother exhibited signs of what they believed at the time to be demonic possession. And called in to investigate, the Warrens determined that an exorcism was necessary to save the young boy, and during this exorcism, David, the young boy, allegedly levitated into the air and predicted the death of Alan Bono, the landlord, at Arne Johnson's hands. Arne then taunted the demon and seemingly invited it to possess him instead, and then several months later, he ended up taking Bono's life, just like the prophecy prophesied. When the case went to trial, Johnson's defense team tried to introduce this supernatural element of demonic possession into the mix, with the Warrens testifying in court to support the claim, but the judge ultimately ruled such defense inadmissible, and Johnson was convicted of his crime. Next up, we have the story that inspired the movie The Haunting in Connecticut. In 1986, Carmen and Al Snedeker rented a house in Southington, Connecticut. Little did they know that their new residence held a sinister secret. It had once been a funeral parlor. The Snedekers found mortuary tools in the basement. Turns out the house wasn't just a home, but a former abode for the deceased, many of whom, it appeared, had never truly left. The family reported this lingering scent of rotting flesh which permeated in the air. The water would occasionally run red, like blood. The haunting escalated further as the Snedekers' eldest son started experiencing terrifying visions and claimed to see these malevolent spirits. Carmen and Al even reported being scandalously touched by these apparitions, leaving them quite traumatized and terrified, and they finally sought help from Ed and Lorraine. The Warrens, after a thorough examination of the house, did confirm the haunting to be the tormented souls of the deceased who had passed through the funeral home, and they suspected that the morticians who'd once operated there had engaged in sinister and unethical practices with the bodies, angering the spirits and keeping them from moving on. At number 8, we have the Perrin family case. In 1970, Roger and Carolyn Perrin moved to a seemingly idyllic 200-acre farmhouse in Rhode Island with their 5 young daughters. Turns out, though, that their new home had a very dark past. Over the years, a series of former residents had met horrifying ends within the home. Some died in mysterious circumstances, and others took their own lives. The Perrins came to believe that the spirits of these souls were roaming around their house. The paranormal activity the family experienced ran the gamut from benevolent to malevolent. Some spirits appeared harmless, even playing with the Perrin children and occasionally lending a hand with household chores, but other, more sinister entities began tormenting the family. And in 1974, the family turned to Ed and Lorraine Warren for help. Apparently, though, after they showed up, stuff just got worse, reaching a point where Roger Perrin felt like he needed to just ask the Warrens to leave. Next on the list, we have the Enfield poltergeist. In 1977, Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4, made a terrifying call to the police from her Enfield home in North London. She reported unsettling phenomena that had been going on in her house. Peggy claimed to have witnessed furniture mysteriously moving, and 2 of her children, Janet and Margaret, claimed to have heard strange knocking sounds coming from inside the walls. Little did they know that their lives were about to be changed by one of the most famous poltergeist cases occurrences in history. Over the course of the next 18 months, more than 30 individuals, including neighbors, psychic researchers, journalists, they came to the Hodgson home to investigate these bizarre occurrences. And witness reported heavy furniture moving on its own, objects being hurled across rooms without any apparent cause. The paranormal activity reached an even more alarming level when Janet and Margaret Hodgson were photographed levitating several feet above their beds. Ed and Lorraine Warren were contacted in 1978, and they concluded that a malevolent and demonic presence had taken residence in the Enfield house. Number 6, the exorcism of the Southend werewolf. This next case unfolded in Essex, England. A seemingly ordinary carpenter named William Ramsey claimed to be plagued by a demonic possession that drove him to transform into a werewolf-like creature. Ramsey's ordeal began at the tender age of 9 when he apparently experienced his first transformation. While playing outdoors, he suddenly felt an unnaturally cold breeze and smelt a horrible odor, which triggered a violent frenzy. And during this episode, he exhibited incredible strength, uprooting a fence post still attached to the fence and gnawing at the wire mesh. Ramsey's next transformation wouldn't occur till much later when he was an adult though, and in these supposed transformations, he'd experience sudden violent fits of rage where he would display what witnesses described as almost inhuman strength. He would bare his teeth, he would growl menacingly, and he could contort his hands into claw-like shapes. In 1989, the Warrens got wind of Bill Ramsey. They convinced him to travel from England to their church in Connecticut, where a specialist in exorcism, Bishop Robert McKenna, would attempt to rid him of the demonic presence. And according to everyone involved, the exorcism was a success, and Bill went on to live a werewolf-free life. At our number 5 spot, we have the dollhouse. This is a lesser known case associated with Ed and Lorraine. It involves a haunted dollhouse that was believed to be inhabited by malevolent spirits. Now, this dollhouse wasn't your typical child's toy. It was a miniature replica of a house, and some of the stuff going on within this dollhouse included mysterious movements of the miniature furniture and figures inside, rearranging themselves in eerie, unexplainable ways. Ed and Lorraine conducted their paranormal investigation of the dollhouse, which included methods like interviews with witnesses, psychic readings, and attempts to communicate with whatever spirits were attached to the dollhouse. It's unclear whether the Warrens were able to permanently rid the dollhouse of this malevolent spirit, or if the case is just unresolved. Next on the list is the Union Cemetery case. This Connecticut cemetery became a major location for their work because of the persistent reports of ghostly apparitions and strange phenomena going on there. The site had a reputation for being one of the most haunted cemeteries in the United States. One of the most famous occurrences at Union Cemetery is the White Lady legend. Witnesses claim to have seen the ghostly figure of a woman in a white dress wandering amongst the tombstones, often vanishing into thin air. This apparition was said to be the spirit of a grieving mother searching for her deceased child, and the Warrens conducted a number of investigations at Union Cemetery to document and understand the reported supernatural activity. They employed a lot of tools and techniques to capture evidence of the paranormal: photography, audio recordings, and of course eyewitness testimonies. And over the years they accumulated a pile of data and accounts from those who had experienced encounters with these spirits at the cemetery. Next up is the Smurl haunting. In 1974, Jack and Janet Smurl moved into a seemingly ordinary house on Chase Street in West Pittston, Pennsylvania, expecting nothing more than a peaceful home for their family. But their lives took a terrifying turn when they began to experience a series of unexplainable, unsettling events that convinced them that their home was being haunted by a malevolent spirit. The Smurls reported a long list of creepy stuff, all pointing to the presence of a demon within their house. They claimed that the entity had brutally slammed their German Shepherd into a wall, oh no, bit Jack's ear, and even pushed one of their daughters down a flight of stairs. In 1986, the Smurls reached out to Ed and Lorraine Warren for help. They confirmed the sinister presence within the Smurl home. Ed Warren even claimed to have witnessed a dark mass forming inside the house. He also claimed to have seen a message written in a mirror telling him to get out, which he believed to have been left by the entity. Coming in at number 2, we have probably the most famous Ed and Lorraine Warren case, the Amityville case in Long Island, New York, 1975. The story began with the Lutz family, who moved into what appeared to be this picturesque suburban home. What they didn't know was that just a year prior, the house had been the site of a gruesome mass murder committed by Ronald Defoe Jr., who had taken the lives of 6 members of his family. In the first 28 days of their stay there, the Lutz family experienced just an onslaught of terror. They reported swarms of flies appearing out of nowhere, unexplained banging noises echoing throughout their house, ooze dripping down their walls, and even seeing full-on apparitions. The most outlandish thing they would report, though, is that some members of the family would allegedly levitate off their beds. When the Lutz family turned to Ed and Lorraine Warren for help, they agreed to conduct a cleansing of the house, and during their visit they captured photographs of the house, one of which seems to show a small boy standing in the shadows with glowing eyes, which is one of the most famous ghost photos in history. And it's pretty creepy if that boy indeed was not in the home at the time, which everyone claims wasn't. Lorraine Warren herself has expressed that out of all the cases she's been involved in, the Amityville house haunts her the most, or haunted her the most. But that's going to bring us to number 1 with the Annabelle case. The Annabelle case revolves around a seemingly innocuous object, an ordinary Raggedy Ann doll. Donna, a young nurse, received this doll as a gift from her mother, and initially it appeared to be just a harmless toy, but it didn't take long before strange events started to unfold in Donna's apartment, where she lived with her roommate Angie. The doll had a tendency to move on its own, even moving from one room to another. Notes with chilling messages, "help me," written in a child's handwriting, starting appearing throughout the apartment. Lou, Angie's boyfriend, claimed to have experienced a nightmarish encounter. He woke up one night paralyzed with fear and then just saw the doll slowly crawling up his body, seemingly attempting to strangle him. Donna and Angie sought the guidance of a medium who identified the entity attached to the doll as the spirit of a 7-year-old girl named Annabelle Higgins. The medium insisted that the spirit meant no harm, but Ed and Lorraine Warren had a different interpretation. They believed a malevolent demonic presence was behind the unsettling phenomena surrounding the doll. The Warrens performed a blessing in Donna's residence before deciding to take possession of Annabelle, removing it from the young woman's lives. It sat for years in Ed and Lorraine's occult museum of the paranormal before it finally closed.
Coming in at number 10, we have Julia. Julia is my sister's name. Also, on the day of scripting this video, it is her birthday, so happy birthday, Julia. The best human alive, bar none. This story is not about my sister though, and while I'm sure I've made the odd demonically possessed joke about her in our youth, she most definitely is free of the devil. The Julia in this story, however, is filled with him. Apparently. A Yale graduate and self-expressed man of science, Dr. Richard Gallagher, experienced a possession so dastardly that it had him question his beliefs. The Ivy League educated, board-certified psychiatrist who teaches at Columbia University and the New York Medical College came across a woman named, you guessed it, Julia. Well, that's what we're calling her. Anyway. She was a strange woman with flowing black clothes and gothic makeup. She proclaimed herself queen of a satanic cult, but she had approached a priest because she was worried that she was possessed. Gallagher said that objects would fly off shelves around her and she knew odd details about Gallagher's life. The professor said that Julia started appearing to him even when she wasn't there. Creepy. Coming into number 9, bear with me on the pronunciation here, we have the Wan Uimata Makutu lifting. It was a mouthful. In 2009, a teenage girl died and another had her eyes gouged out during a Maori exorcism performed by her relatives who believed that they were cursed. The teens had stolen a lion statue from outside a pub and therefore were subjected to a several-day-long exorcism despite returning it. The surviving teenager recounted the experience, saying that her family stood around her in a circle in water and her grandparents actually came home and told her to go with peace and love. She arrived at hospital with her eyes oozing blood and claimed that she'd been forced to drink urine and repeatedly was kicked by her family. The lengthy trial of the girl's family members lasted 29 days. It made headlines and caused a lot of controversy as many Maori people supported the practice of Makutu. One uncle and 4 aunts were found guilty of the drowning and abuse. Honestly, so intense. So is demonic possession real, or can it easily be faked? Consider this at number 8. That's right, we are talking about Martha Brosier. Martha Brosier lived in the mid-1500s and was accused of fraud after it was suspected that she had actually faked demonic possessions, which at the time did bring her considerable fame. She said she suffered a shortness of breath, she could not stick out her tongue, and she would regularly gnash her teeth together. She'd spasm and complain of voices in her head. How was her fraud discovered? It seems that she was tricked into drinking holy water under the guise of normal water, which reportedly had no effect. Right, so that solved that then. How she was able to speak with her mouth shut in fluent and intelligible French, English and Greek is an utter mystery. Coming into number 7, we have the real exorcism of Emily Rose. So you may have seen the 2005 movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. It's actually on Netflix and it's quite the horror show. The real Emily Rose is a teenager called Anna Elizabeth Mitchell who lived in a very religious kind of upbringing in Bavaria in West Germany. She attended mass twice a week and was raised in a very Catholic environment. Anna Elise, as she was known, suffered from epilepsy and possible schizophrenia. She began hearing voices and she thought that she was going to rot in hell. She claimed that she would have horrifying visions while she was praying. This obviously concerned her religious family and they were convinced that she was possessed. As a result, her condition then worsened. A local priest also came forward and convinced that actually she was a demon. He said there was a demon in her, so he called for an exorcism in 1975. Bishop Strangle, with the permission of Anna Elise's parents, conducted 67 exorcisms on the young woman. Now, Emily did die aged 23 after suffering a year of demonic exorcisms during which she was starved, she contracted pneumonia, and she had broken knees from having to kneel so often. It was ruled by courts that her death was preventable, so was she mentally ill or was she possessed? Coming into number 6, we have The Devil Made Me Do It. This is one Ed and Lorraine Warren case that even the pair of spooky investigators who by and large had seen it all were absolutely scared of. The story starts off with an 11-year-old boy named David Glatzel. Along with Catholic priests, the pair were called in to try and rid the boy of demons. Over several days of grueling spiritual work, the group believed that they had exorcised the unwanted spirit. But there was a dramatic twist. The Warrens claimed that the demon actually fled into his brother, 18-year-old Arnes, although they didn't realise at the time. Just months later, Arnie wasn't feeling himself at all, and then one night he killed his landlord in an argument. His defense lawyer argued that he was possessed, and the Warrens were even called in to testify in court. The pair claimed that actually they did believe him to be possessed by none other than the devil. After their testimony, Arnie served just 5 years in jail and was released in his mid-20s. We don't actually know where he is now or what he's up to. I don't even know if the devil was ever exorcised from him. Coming into number 5, we have Mademoiselle Elizabeth de Ranfeng. Mademoiselle Ranfeng became a widow in 1617, after which she was heavily courted by her physician, her doctor. It seems that he would buy her gifts, and after she rejected him, he prescribed her a liquid which was later thought to have been a love potion. She started behaving strangely, but the man continued to treat her with potions. It is thought that he infected her with the devil. The ailments that she suffered led people to believe that she was possessed, and she was exorcised in 1619. During her exorcism, it was said that a demon presented itself and spoke in French, Greek, Latin and Hebrew, and Italian. The demon was reportedly able to know and recite the thoughts and sins of the various individuals who examined her. The demon was super persistent, but eventually Mademoiselle Ranfeng was cured, thankfully. The physician who had slipped her the potions, unfortunately though for him, was burned alive for practicing magic. Cripes, the 17th century was a very intense time, the stakes were very high. Coming into number 4, one of my favourite historical figures I had no idea they'd been exorcised, we have Salvador Dali. I love me a bit of Salvador Dali, especially in the extreme moustache years. The 20th century surrealist artist created some thought-provoking and subversive work, such as The Persistence of Memory and The Lobster Telephone. Hello. The Spanish visionary regularly offended the Catholic Church, and however in his later life the artist did write in defense of the religion, which is, I guess, kind of confusing. Friar Gabriel Maria Berardi claimed to have performed an exorcism on Dali in France in 1947. Allegedly, the artist created a sculpture of Christ and gave it to the friar as a thank you. The man certainly was quirky, but expressly so in the 1930s and early 40s. Perhaps the genius behind his work all along was the devil, but honestly, if I was going to put my money on it, I'd say it was likely the absinthe. Coming into number 3, we have the Tănăacu exorcism. Some nasty things went down in Romania. In June 2005, a nun was crucified in the mountain village of Tănăacu, which, to be honest, what on earth? That's some straight up horror movie stuff, right? Is this the basis for the nun? Sister Irina Connici grew up in an orphanage, and following her death, her brother did testify that actually he'd witnessed Satan go into her. It seems that Sister Irina may have been mentally ill, and it was said that she would giggle during Mass. It seems that she got into an argument with a 29-year-old priest, Father Chronageu. As a result, he claimed that she was possessed by Satan. Now, she was bound and gagged and exorcised. However, the father claimed that she was beyond salvation. He had her crucified. An article in the Daily Telegraph from 2005 claims that she was found gagged and chained to a cross. After her death, the priest claimed that God had performed a miracle. At her funeral, claps of thunder rang out as the coffin was lowered into the ground, which the priest said was a sign that the will of God had been done. What a nutter, he literally murdered her. Those who were involved in the nun's murder were sentenced to time in jail, but nobody served more than 7 years. If someone crucified me, honestly, I really hope they'd spend the rest of their life in prison. We have a very shocking case at number 2. We have Mother Teresa. Did you know that she was exorcised? Mother Teresa is considered to have been one of the holiest women to have ever lived. The woman received a Nobel Peace Prize, although I will say that other reports say that she was cruel and friends with top leaders of Masonic cults, so I don't know. Mother Teresa fell ill in 1996, breaking her collarbone. Now, months later, she contracted malaria and suffered heart failure. It seems that the Archbishop of Calcutta ordered a priest to perform an exorcism because he thought that actually she was under attack by the devil. He said that she was very agitated and removed wires from her body in hospital. She died just a short while later. This is the exorcism case that inspired the movie The Exorcist. Coming into number 1, we have Roland Doe. In the late 1940s, a number of priests performed an exorcism on a boy in the United States. The boy was kept anonymous as he was just 14 years old, with reports being made by the church that actually, there was a devil in there. They gave him the pseudonym of Ronald Doe. It seems that his aunt introduced him to an Ouija board before she died, after which the family experienced a haunting. Events got even worse as objects started flying or levitating when the boy was near. Priests were called in to exorcise him, and during the first procedure, the boy broke free of restraints. He broke a bed spring and then used it to slash a priest. The boy was taken to the Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis, Missouri, where he was placed in a psychiatric wing before his next exorcism. Doctors and nurses said that the words hell and evil appeared in marks on his body. Finally, the demon was exorcised and the hospital was later razed.